Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Between the Lines. My name is John Lofton here. So happy to be with you guys today, June 27th, 2021. Wow. Something look different to you guys? I'm just asking. Does any of this kind of look different than usual? You guys may have seen our photo. If you haven't, please check out our for friends of me on Facebook. I put this on the Lofton Space Facebook channel earlier on, or the Facebook page, I should say. And I basically was showing a little 360 view of the room. So check that out over there on the Lofton Space main page. But we're still working on the Facebook page for Between the Lines, but that is coming. So, again, very happy to be with you guys as always this week, and I can't believe it. So far, so good. Hardly any technical issues, even with the big studio rearrangement. Everything seems to be going well today, so I'm quite happy about that. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about cancel culture, the news, who can you trust, and who can you not trust. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing today. So it really, like I always do, I start out, and hang on a second. We're going to switch over here. See, just when I say, hey, everything's working great, you got to push it live, Producer Raven. I got my lovely producer, Raven. She is here with us. Hit Odie Cam. There you go. And then hit push live. Hopefully it won't do its thing. I'm worried it's going to do the timer. Let me take a look here, guys. Here, I'm going to pass that mouse here. So we're just going to make sure. See, just when I say no technical issues, what do we get? The inability to switch scenes. And of course, my system wants to lock down a little bit. I'm going to double check something over here on the YouTube side of things. Yeah, it looks like it's going okay on this side. It's just really slow on my end. So we'll hang out here for just a little bit while my system kind of plays catch up. It's been doing this kind of thing where it kind of hangs for a long time. My guess is I've got some sort of RAM issue on my PC. That's actually kind of what's been going on. But anyway, we're going to make do until this thing decides it wants to catch up, because I really don't want to stop the stream here and lose all of you guys. That would be a real bummer to me. So we're going to go ahead and make do with the wide angle view until my PC decides it wants to kind of catch up locally, but it doesn't appear to be impacting you guys for whatever reason. So, but anyway, but yeah, what's happening is this kind of idea of cancel culture in the news, and this kind of new wave idea of like, oh my gosh, this everything's offensive, everything is bad news, everything is just terrible in the world, and what are we gonna do about it? It's always like, it seems to me like the news does really well at making us panic and like kind of like want to go after something like for some just cause, but then always has to find a way to make more conflict out of a situation. I don't know what it is. So, and a lot of that is ratings, because everybody likes, to have conflict and all of that. So, but yeah, I'm just trying to switch over here still. It kind of popped up on me here. But yeah, it's almost like it does well with conflict, but not very good at resolution. And it tries to find a resolution. It's like, what can happen? And then you see these like little stories of generosity and everything, these nuggets kind of tucked in either like right before a weather forecast or kind of right after weather. And on a national scale, you'll kind of see it. And what's popped up recently, and I'm going to name this one specifically. It's not the network I work for, but what you see is this News Nation. You guys did you guys ever watch that? And they claim to be the new unbiased network. Yet it kind of just seems like the reporting style is much the same as everybody else. I don't know why. It seems to have this sort of progressive narrative to it. And you guys probably noticed that watching the news. Like, you have certain networks, like everybody knows CNN tends to favor more liberal ideas and liberal agenda type things, right? They seem to get more democratic in those progressive pundits on their show, whereas Fox News typically, and you can look at a bunch of others like, oh my gosh, why is my memory slipping me? But you can look at a bunch of other stuff. Everybody's got their favorite. MSNBC, like I said, oh my gosh, wow. My memory is really having issues. So you MSNBC, the regular NBC networks, your local affiliate, ABC, they all have kind of this idea here, and and well, my producer's like Fox, like well Fox News, I guess Fox Business, all that, and but you kind of get this idea. And so where I'm coming from today is this idea of, well, how can we decipher what's really news? Should we just cancel news media altogether and just like start over? Like I kind of had this idea the other day of what if we just hit a big reset button? Like everybody working in journalism right now was fired, and they either have to go back for another 2 years of school to actually learn how to go back to unbiased broadcasting, and like news isn't based on media and ratings, but rather actual a public service and information. And there's no profit in it. Like it would almost be a non-profit idea. I know that's like the most radical idea I've ever had in like years. And that's saying something since I worked for a news agency or a news media outlet. And but yeah, it's just you kind of just yeah. I guess I really don't know how to explain it other than that. But it would just seem to me like, what if we made news a nonprofit, right? You can't profit off of telling people the facts of the world. Like it is what it is. And we have examples of that, you know, PBS, uh, NPR, things like that. But I still feel like there's a little semblance of there because they still rely on sponsorship. Something's got to pay the bills. And I'm not saying we should have like a government controlled news media outlet because we all know how that goes. That doesn't work. So what's the compromise here? All we really want, I think if you're watching this, you're probably like me and you're thinking like, how can we possibly just find a way to basically how can we find a way to know if the stuff that we're reading online, the stuff that we read in a paper still, if you're into that still, or online papers, I guess, and or TV or radio or whatever the case may be, whatever format, how can we tell if we're really getting the truth? What's the proper perspective? How can we analyze a story and kind of figure out what's really happening here versus what the narrative is? So the narrative is defined as what direction is the story going to go in? Where do we want the viewer to be taken to? And so many of you guys know I have a tiny little bit of journalism background when I was studying broadcasting and obviously working in media. Now I get to see some of the writing process. You know, I get to talk to a lot of our talent and things like that and kind of figure out their methodology. And I'll tell you that talent naturally have their own bias because they're people just like us. So they have a preference as to what direction they have happen. You know, I can tell you that there are talent who, you know, will be listening to something the president says and they just scoff or they'd be like, yes, he's saying this, they're so happy. Like they have that and they're entitled to that. I'm not saying that because they're off camera, it's not like they're saying that on camera. But what happens is I kind of wonder if some of that doesn't rub off in their journalism style. And how do we really tell that? And then also the corporate perspective, because a lot of you kind of know this, but if you belong to a big affiliate, a lot of your national packets of news come from a single source. So that same video gets sent to all the different stations within that network. So it's the same thing. So that narrative gets exactly pushed to everybody. There really isn't much uniqueness to local reporting when it comes to national events. You don't really get a lot of that anymore. Now, sometimes you do. Some people, bigger markets, you are the national, stage, if you will. So I think that, we kind of have this idea of, well, if you're going to be big, you better be consistent in what you're saying. But that consistency, it kind of feels like makes some type of some issues. It's not going to attract every single person. It's why you might be an NBC person, but CBS is still there. It's okay. It's fine, but you don't really like it. Like for me, this isn't really news. But if I'm up at 10:30 at night and I'm watching, a late show, the show comes right after, between Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Fallon, I will 100% of the time choose Jimmy Fallon. Why? because I feel like Stephen Colbert has nothing better to do than to continue to harp and bash on a president who's not even president anymore. I don't know what his vendetta is, but it's not funny. He's supposed to be funny. It's not funny. So, but yet they talk about news, but then they add like a humorous twist at the end of it. But so you really can't take it seriously, even though they're telling you about a serious event or a serious thing that happened, and then they make light of it. So, but when you're looking at it and you're trying to evaluate a story, there's some stories that just naturally happen. They're bad. And we're usually talking about disaster. This last week, many of you probably already heard about the building that collapsed in Florida along a beachfront. And last I had heard, it was kind of being investigated that maybe the steel anchors underneath the sea or the sand floor where it's been anchored into the sandbar had gotten salt water in there, and it over time eroded all of the had eroded all of the steel that was holding it, had corroded and rusted and all that, and that's what caused the collapse potentially. But there were a lot of people who died. I hadn't heard of a lot of survivors, so I'm not going to speak deliberately on a particular story. But there's stories like that that come up, and they're universally just bad. You don't have to put a twist on it. I'm sure it'll happen eventually. But when it first broke, it really was, this is what happened. This is what we know. This is what we're investigating to try to find out why it happened. And then slowly you'll see different stations will take a different twist on it, on what should happen and where the narrative is going to be later on after we're over the shock of what's been going on. And so that's kind of what I want you guys to think about. And here's some advice. So when you're watching a news outlet, okay, because news is on a lot. Most of you have access to a 24/7 news station. Watch one news station, especially if it's a big event, and then go watch another station and compare the two stories about the same event and see where they're similar and see where they're different. And what I usually do is I go off of what's similar. And so if they're both telling me the same thing, the same numbers, same figures, about the same tone, I tend to trust it from bigger news outlets. But I tend to have to diverge when blame starts being investigated, because it's not up to the news to be assigning blame, or even insinuating it. A lot of times they'll find people with statements that seem to opinionate blame on a particular individual or a particular situation, or how they depict the conflict. In my opinion, that is not the news media place to be seeking out those type of narratives. It is the news job to be diversifying and really getting perspective. And watch the on-camera time. So what I mean by on-camera time, I mean, so if Donald Trump got on there and says something about a situation, now granted, he's not president anymore. Okay, so you might have to take two senators, for example. Okay, let's do this in Iowa. Let's say Joni Ernst made a comment about a particular political situation. Let's take the infrastructure bill. Okay, and then we take Representative Sidney Axie, and I'm talking about Iowa because I'm mostly familiar with, obviously, Iowa politics. And let's say we took those two, and I realized Sidney Axie, okay, just get an idea. They're both representative. It's not like a president and all of that, and you're not dealing with that. Okay, so just take this at face value for me. Two political representatives of Iowa, and let's take this. Let's say that we get like a 5-second blurb from Joni Ernst, but they give Sidney Axie about 30 seconds on the same topic. It gives the appearance, not saying that this is what's happening. It may have just been Joni Ernst only had 5 seconds to say about a particular subject. Okay, so I'm not saying that, but pay attention to the content and pay attention to the elaboration on it and the tag on a particular package. and kind of get your idea, and you can sort of get the tonality of it. Then go and watch that same thing and see if you can't find a different clip from the same interview from the same person. This takes a lot of work, and you're right, it should not be this hard. It should not be this complicated. But if you're really interested in finding a good starting point for your own investigation, which I'm getting to here in a second, that is how I would start my investigation. And I would not just take a single source and let that be your defining view. Even if you're a staunch Republican and you love, and I mean you love Fox News like with a passion, like you don't trust no one else. I can tell you Fox News is not always right. And you know it as well. In your heart of hearts, you know that they get the facts and the situations wrong a lot. So does everybody else. It was what was it, the situation that happened at a gay pride parade or something like that in Florida, and I'm not gonna, or not Florida, yeah, it was, forgive me here, but the original, it was like this last week, and I tried not to focus on a particular story because I didn't come prepared to speak about specifics in regards to that. I really was hoping to speak more in generalities, but maybe it would have been helpful, my apologies, to have a little bit more specifics here. But it was widely reported that there was possibly a terrorist attack, or that it was motivated based on the content of the event. And then it was later found out, no, it was probably more than likely an accident. Their foot got stuck between the gas and the brake, and et cetera, et cetera. Um, so do you see how it's so easy for an agency to rush into this whole narrative of it must have been a terrorist attack, or it must have been profiled, deliberate action, when in all reality still is possible? And even going so far as to really look at Derek Chauvin, which we had video evidence that looked, and I gotta admit, that was wrong. And I love the police. Y'all see the Blue Lives Matter? Yeah, I believe that, truthful, heart and soul, and because without police, our society would go completely into chaos. We need police. We need good police, but we definitely need them to abolish entire. And then that's a whole different subject. But my point being is, as an officer, they're trained to deal with situations that you and I wouldn't have a single clue how to deal with. And are they going to be perfect all the time? No. But even then, it was so quick and so easy to rush that Derek Chauvin was guilty even before the verdict came down. Way before the verdict came down. And because we thought it looked so obvious, and I got to admit, it looks pretty obvious. But at the same time, there are things about policing and things like that that were being told, and I'm not saying they were inaccurate, but they really should have been saved for the trial. And then they come out in the trial, and we all learn about it together. We all learn about what's really happening in a place where if you lie, you go to jail. That's perjury. And so you need to let the justice system do what its thing. Guilty by public opinion is dangerous, especially if it's being perpetrated that it's coming from the news, because of the narrative that's being carried out here. And so that circles back to my whole idea of, well, what if we hit a big reset button? Everybody who's working for major news networks is fired. That would include myself. Fine. But what if we did that? Hypothetically, not saying we will, but what if we did that? What if we just fired everybody and we started over? And if you wanted to come back and work in news, you had to go back to school for 2 years and relearn how maybe they did it in the 50s and 60s. And I'm not saying the 50s and 60s, they weren't biased or starting to get there. But I listened to a 60s, like a 1960s newscast. And I listened to the stoicness of the anchor. Very firm, very rigid, because their job wasn't to show emotion. Their job, as its fundamentals, is to tell you the news and let you make up your own dang mind about it. Not to kind of subtly insist these little things that tend to want to drive people to believe a certain narrative. And the last thing I'll talk about deals with COVID-19 and the vaccine, and why a lot of people don't want to get it. And I think, and I'm just thinking in my mind, now I've had the vaccine. I chose to do it but I was also required to do it because of the kidney transplant stuff. It was my decision. I wasn't necessarily crazy about it. I was definitely hesitant, but I made up my own mind to do it. And that's what I would encourage you to do as well. Make up your own mind if you haven't been vaccinated already to look at your own research. And even then, yes, look at the CDC because they're our governing body that does all this. And it's supposed to be impartial. It's supposed to be unbiased by nature. Talk to your own personal doctor about it if you're concerned. And then look at some of the statistics, what are the effects, what's really happening here, what really are the success rate. And I get the idea that we don't want to take something that we're just going to need boosters on every year, and they're trying to make this out like no big deal, but it is a big deal. It's like we already are expected. Some people have to get a pneumonia shot. Some people already have to get a flu shot. Now you want us to get a COVID shot every year potentially, and some people have a real big problem with that for time convenience or just practicality or the side effects because some people had a really bad time with the side effects. What I'm saying, though, is when the news talks about it, it is a constant push to get the vaccine, get the vaccine, get the vaccine, get the vaccine. Do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. But this is something almost unified across almost all networks. Fox, I would say, of course, as you might expect, a little bit more subtle on the idea. But generally speaking, everybody's been pushing it from the government all the way down to the news. And so it seems really convincing. But here's what can happen, and here's what I think is happening. We distrust the news media so much as a society that if they tell us to do something and they're all doing it, it's almost like a rebelliousness to say, no, 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 this something seems fishy about this. And I admit, that was my thinking too. Something seems odd about everybody saying that this is the best thing that we can do right now is to get this experimental vaccine that the FDA hasn't even been approved yet. Technically, it's approved for emergency use. Let's be clear about that. Emergency use. That's not the same way a normal drug goes about getting authorization to be sold in a market. Now, granted, the other thing that's interesting about this is whether you have insurance or not, it is free. That seems odd because typically in healthcare, we pay for everything. Or we have a deductible or a copay or we have to belong to Medicare or Medicaid. And so to have this thing where they're saying, well, just give it to you for free. Come on, get your shot. And all of that, it just seems pushy, too pushy for a lot of people. And it can make people feel very uncomfortable about the idea. This is where my thinking about news and critical thinking come into play. So when you watch a story and you're listening to the statistics, because every news station, at least locally here where I'm at, every day talks about the number of people who've been diagnosed with it, the number of people recovered, what the active percentage rate is, how many people are in the hospital, how many people are on ventilators even. We don't talk about that in flu season. It's something ironic that's happening here specifically with COVID-19, and it just is all the time in your face. You can't go anywhere without someone mentioning COVID, including this podcast. So that's my point, folks. Research stuff. Even if the one source you're reading is completely outlandish, would most likely be deemed misinformation by the news network, do not, and this comes at my own disadvantage, but do not trust just one news source. Always cross-reference. This is good journalism too. You cannot just take a story at face value from one source. You have to dig around it. You have to figure out what's at the core of it, especially on issues that matter. Every day we have a shooting, or we have crime, a local beat crime, Amazon package thefts and things like that, and we have just these petty stuff or a gas station robbery, and you don't see a lot. I'm not saying you have to be critical about necessarily those things because they're going to be pretty consistent. But when it becomes a bigger issue, something that gets reported on day in, day out, especially the stuff that affects you and your life, like especially the mask mandate when that happened, and they lifted mask restrictions for people who had been vaccinated while keeping people who haven't been vaccinated masked, because it almost seems like this obvious idea that, oh my gosh, you didn't get your vaccine and you're wearing a mask. You must have not gotten your vaccine since you're wearing a mask. Some people, even though they're vaccinated, are still wearing masks, mind you. But it is nice. I'm noticing more and more, though, in public that most people have decided that it is safe enough to go around. And you see this with the news folks. They're doing interviews now where they're, even with people not affiliated with the news network, are they're both not wearing a mask. So I just want to give you that as perspective. So you start noticing those things. Do your own little research. Talk to people you trust when it comes to stuff like that. Talk to your doctor when it comes to medical stuff that the news is reporting about if it affects you. Um, especially like I know there was just this new thing. It didn't get reported on a lot, but there's a new age for colonoscopy screenings and colon cancer screenings and stuff like that. And I think it's 45 now, if I'm correct. Um, I hope my producer's fact checking me. But I believe it's 45 now for the new recommendation for your colon checks. Um, but that's my thing, is you have to go out and do your own research. It's a disadvantage to everybody, and I wish that news networks would focus on that. Focus at the core value of what they teach you in journalism 101. How to write a news story 101. And how to put aside your biasness or a corporate perspective of what you're supposed to say and how you're supposed to say it, and read a news story plain and dry. I mean, that's the best way to do it. It's not exciting. It's not going to, wow you with an entertainment factor, but in my opinion, journalism and news shouldn't be about excitement. It shouldn't be about, and I know my title on YouTube isn't like, let's cancel culture this, but I guess it kind of took a little bit different turn than what I was kind of planning here, but I really feel like this is important. But if we just canceled all the news media out there all at once, I'm not sure it would do society a great bit of good either. So there is a downside, obviously, to my radical idea. It was just one of those thoughts I had, like, hey, let's just cancel everybody, fire everybody, and rehire. Obviously, that's not realistic. It's never going to happen. But, it would be so nice. And I honestly, genuinely, I know you guys see a lot of the stickers down the back. And yes, I believe all those things. Yes, I'm a Christian. Yes, I stand for the flag and kneel for the cross. Yes, I believe Blue Lives Matter. Yes, I'm a man and I like my man cave stuff and all this that. I'm like a guy. So I have that expected. But when I'm talking to you guys, I genuinely want to make sure that I'm understanding both sides of an issue before I really get into like this and I talk about it. And news is just something that I've been around for a long time, and I've had studied it, and I understand it. And I wanted to share that perspective with you guys, because it's one of those things a lot of people just don't know how to critically think about news. They just sort of go along with the station that kind of is easiest for them to listen to or aligns with their own ideologies, those sort of things. So I just I would just encourage everybody to make sure that you're doing your own due diligence and you're watching your stuff as closely as you can, and yeah. So with that, I think we're gonna wrap things up here. But I just want to remind you guys that you can always check out our website, btllive.com, see our videos. We're on YouTube as well. We will be getting a Facebook page up and running very soon. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Really would love for this show to take off and reach a wide audience. That's always been my goal. I will figure out this, and if this software continues to act like this, I'm probably going to switch to a different software because we want something reliable. I don't want to deal with this every week with you guys. This is the only time my software ever freaks out on me, and it doesn't do it when I'm video editing, whatever, but we'll figure this out. So I apologize I got stuck on this one camera angle the entire show. Certainly wasn't my intention, but I didn't really want to start this broadcast all over again. Yeah, anyway, well, again, we did have a phone number up last week. If you're looking for that number, it will be posted again this next week. We changed it out, actually, just to make a number. I found one that was a little bit easier to reconcile and remember. But anyway, all right. Well, thank you again for listening to Between the Lines. Again, my name is John Lofton here. We will see you guys next week, same time, same place, 4 p.m. Central, right here on Between the Lines.